internet to psychoanalytic talk. And today we're going to talk about the 4 existential dimensions of mankind. So what are the 4 dimensions? Well, we have the Umwelt, the Eigenwelt, the Mitwelt, and the Uberwelt. So I really hope I said those correctly. I'm really unsure because I've never studied German. So please let me know. Anyway, so we're going to start with the Umwelt. The Umwelt is the perception of the world, how we see it, how we smell it, how we feel it, how we experience it. This has to do, of course, with our biology. For example, the ears, the eyes that receive the information of the outside world. We treat it within our minds, brains. We perceive it in a certain way. This is a very, very sensorial approach to our world. But it represents the most physical value to our world. For example, what is happening, for example, as I'm watching this, for example, this screen that's recording me, I'm watching that screen in the same way that you are watching this screen with your eyes, or you're hearing, or you're listening with your ears. This is the Umwelt. It's the phenomena of all our perceptions. And what's very interesting with the Umwelt is that it's very different from species to species. For example, the Umwelt of, let's say, a frog is going to be very, very different from the Umwelt of a human. In the same way it goes for snakes, for spiders, and so on and so forth. So every species has its Umwelt of its special way to perceive the world due to its senses and its sensorial experiences. And it's the first connection to the outside world. It's a physical one in which our senses are triggered, or we receive something from on our skin, and as I was saying, visually, auditively, all of these things. That's the Umwelt. A very interesting concept. And I should also add that it varies enormously also from individual to individual. As for example, someone that's deaf will not have the same Umwelt as someone that's blind, or someone who has both vision and hearing, or even the Umwelt of someone who's schizophrenic is not going to be the same as their perceived instinct that we don't, and so on and so forth. So the Umwelt can vary wildly from individual to individual, and even more globally from species to species, and so on and so forth. So that's for the more, how can I say, physical approach. So now we're gonna leave biology and enter another approach with the Mitwelt. So the Mitwelt is the type of world that we build based on our relationships, i.e. that's the world of objects, i.e. how we interact with other people, how we experience the world as something that's of social, how can I say, presence. For example, when we start interacting with people, the ideas we build, the imagos, the pictures we have of others in our minds, is also part of the Mitwelt. The Mitwelt is the relational aspect. We live, we exist among a society, we exist among others. That otherness that we always have to take into account in our world is what the Mitwelt is about. It's not just about family or immediate experience, it's also about culture, society. It's about interaction at its biggest, because fundamentally that's what at least object theory is about, is that we don't develop alone, we develop with others, and that relationship with others is the basis of ourselves. So we develop a part of our world, a part of ourselves in connection to others. Others define us as much as we define them. And it's also very interesting to me that often people say that they are self-made, but that's ludicrous. Then we are never self-made. We always are made by our experiences and our bond to others. And that's what the Mitwelt is, our relational world with others, both internal and external, towards our collectiveness in humanity. So that's very interesting. So now we're going to move on to the Eigenwelt, which I really hope I pronounced right, because I've had many comments that have said that my pronunciation was kind of off. So I really hope that I've done it justice this time. So the Eigenwelt is this internal world we have all in ourselves, behind the Mitwelt, the Eigenwelt, which is our internal world, how we see things inside of ourselves, how we see ourselves even. That relationship from self to self is the Eigenwelt, the the very moment in which we have an experience of ourselves, how we define ourselves, how we think of ourselves. In psychoanalysis, we might also use the word egosyntonic or egodystonic, that things click with us or don't click with us because we have already a self-image that's very there and organizes our state of being. And it's also to do with our moods. We experience things, we live things in our internal world we might not share with others because they might be too private or too complicated, but they're still there, they still have an impact on who we are and our relationships, and it's very much there. For example, it's also a very important concept, I feel, when we're talking about people who are in catatonia, i.e. who have completely withdrawn from interactions. I think that these ideas that Bringsvanger brings, that they are in the Eigenwelt, they are in the internal world, living something, or even Lang, is very important, as it gives us a way of at least thinking that there is a subjectivity that's still being deployed within, even though they're not communicating. And the Eigenwelt is so important because I feel that it's also the basis of our humanity, that in a way our Mitwelt is built on our Eigenwelt, that we can all empathize with each other because we understand that everyone has an internal world, has a world of fantasies, of drives, of constructs, of beliefs, of false beliefs, of internalized joy and internalized sadness. All of these things are a given and is the basis of our empathy towards one another. So even though I'm presenting them in a separate way, I feel that all these worlds are interconnected in a way that's kind of beautiful, a bit like how the galaxy gravity connects all of the planets in a way, or they all have an influence on one another. And that's what I feel about these worlds. They all connect and all have an influence on one another. And the Eigenwelt is the very internal, personal, subjective world of our representations. So the last one, and perhaps the one that I wasn't aware of until very recently, is the Uberwelt. So the Uberwelt was defined by Renz Smith, I hope I'm saying this right, and in it, it's the world of spirituality, so, or the overworld, if we were to translate it directly. So this world is the world of our ideal, a world in which we perceive things as they should be rather than how they are, but something that's very deep and profoundly ingrained into us, as every human is also comes with his forms of ideal. Ideal here is not to believe in a moral stance necessarily, but it's something of like a form of perfection, a form of how things should be in a theoretical or an ideal world. And that's something that carries us as we try and make things correspond to our ideal. Even though sometimes it might go too far or it might become pathological, we still aim to do something with our ideals. Of course, it's also to do with the spiritual, as the belief in the divinity or the spirituality, in a way, creates this vision of an ideal, of something that could be. And for Renz Smith, it's also intertwined with how religion impacts our societies, as religion is part and parcel of the Uberwelt, as it's one of the defining factors of our spirituality and of our ideal. And even though we might be atheists, one has to always remember that because of the massive impact religion has had in the world and on the world of humankind, that still exerts an influence, even though we might not directly follow it. It's all of those ideas, all of those ideals, for example, kindness, helping each other out, are things that still are very present, even in the most atheist of atheists, right? So I think it's very interesting as an extra world, because as I was telling you, I was only aware of 3, but a 4th one is always welcome, and I find it very interesting. And I found that those worlds are very interesting, as they help us to see that a human, a person, always has many levels in which there's always, as I was saying earlier, a connectiveness to it, something that's there, and we all go through many worlds at the same time. We're not like just in the Eigenwelt or in the Mitwelt or in the Uberwelt. we are in everything at the same time, and we develop them accordingly. I think one can help each other. It's not like they're completely excluding, mutually exclusive, right? They all happen at the same time, and they're all interconnected, which helps us develop. If one world develops, like for example the Mitwelt, it can help us develop Eigenwelt, in the fact that we given into the world of relations, into the world of like being with each other, and then it reinforces the Eigenwelt. In the same way that when we open ourselves up to a form of spirituality or philosophy or reflection, we start developing an Eigenwelt, and we can sometimes feel so much more open to welcome the Mitwelt. In the same way that our Umwelt can sometimes surprise us. We can feel something beautiful, we can see something beautiful, be touched by something that's outside, for example, a landscape, a sunset, and all of that has an impact on our Eigenwelt. And it also might have an impact on our Mitwelt. For example, if we share that moment with people, like, oh, do you remember the sunset we saw at this place? Or do you remember when there was this nice breeze? All of these things feed each other. They're not that separate. We've separated them because we feel that it's more precise, but you have to see it as a long continuum of everything. As I was saying, it's a bit like gravity. Gravity affects everything, every world that we have in our cosmos, but still, every planet is different in a way. So that pretty much sums up the video. I hope you liked it. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments, or even remarks or criticism. No worries. So I'll see you in the next one.